right. Get about one more minute. We are recording, so we can get started now. If that works. Okay, well, thanks to everyone who joined today. And if anyone joins a little bit later, we will be recording. We will send it out after the call. This is Revolutionize Your Health. Compliments of Cenegenics Miami, our newest, latest, and greatest center, actually our flagship center of Cenegenics. So before we get started, I'm going to quickly turn it over to Dr. Camper, as well as Dr. Turner and Rudy Inaba. And we'll start with a basic question. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, what led you to become affiliated with Cenegenics. We'll start with Dr. Camper.
Thank you, Nicole. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone who joined. Yes, welcome to our newly added practice here in Miami. So a little bit about myself. I was family medicine board certified and sport medicine trained and freshly recruited now to Cenegenics to be added onto the health performance team. About myself, I grew up in France and then migrated to California where I completed most of my education. And then some of my training was between California and here, Southern Florida, Miami. I was exposed to a wide variety of practices from county hospitals to university centers, and in the end with the Kaiser Permanente group that was predominant in primary care in California. And now I'm here to be joining the Cenegenics part of the healthcare system at this point. I guess I would say just a quick fun fact, trilingual, French, English, and Spanish.
So trilingual, I don't know many people that are. Okay, so top that, Dr. Turner.
Well, I'm using Duolingo a lot, so I think I'm trying to achieve bilingual, but I'm still working on it. Thanks so much. I'm really grateful to be here. My name is Trevor Turner. I've practiced medicine for about 10 years after training now. I originally trained in something called PM&R, physical medicine and rehab. Sometimes people are not familiar with that field. It's kind of emerged, and the way in which I practiced it was basically minimally invasive orthopedics. I did train some in California and Alabama, and then I've worked in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Got to learn on the coattails of one of the greatest guys in sports medicine with James Andrews, which was really, really fun and exciting. I got recruited to another practice in Atlanta to build what's called an orthobiologics division for them. So it took about 4 years and built out a laboratory that was used both in the OR and outside of the OR to use grafts, or what we call autografts, that we would get from patients. So that was usually either platelets from their blood to make something called PRP, which you may have heard about, for different applications, but the applications for which we were using it were orthopedic. And then also what people call stem cells, or patients call stem cells, which are an MSC. It's a derived cell that comes from the bone marrow. So we were using those things to really optimize people's recovery and their function over time. And it naturally sort of led me down a rabbit hole when people started asking, hey, what are the things that I can do to make my procedure, make my graft, to get prepared for my procedure? How successful can I be in my recovery? How fast can I recover? And so those answers to those questions were a lot of things that Cenegenics does when it comes to optimizing your metabolic health. So that's what really got me interested in it, and just grateful to be here with you guys.
So, and again, just to remind everyone, if you do have any questions, or obviously just hearing what Dr. Turner had to say, if you have any questions that as a follow-up, feel free to put it into the Q&A box, and we'll be able to get that asked for you.
The French questions can go to Dr. Camper.
Okay. All right. Well, before we go there, let's go ahead and go to Rudy Inaba.
Yes. Rudy Inaba, I'm the Vice President of Performance Health for Cenegenics. I've been with the organization since 2009. So I'm the old guy here in Cenegenics years. But I've been really incredibly fortunate to watch the organization grow and to expand broadly as we are now. Starting from humble beginnings in my undergrad before I left for Vegas in graduate school, I was watching an episode of 60 Minutes about the race for longevity and longevity goals, and the camera panned out to this desert oasis in Las Vegas and a Rolls Royce and these physicians that are out in the desert treating patients and doing VO2 max testing and managing their nutritional habits, and how we can start to incorporate so many different nutraceuticals and different therapies to optimize health. And meanwhile, I'm sitting in Pennsylvania eating dinner, getting ready to go to two of my 3 part-time jobs. I'm like, this place is awesome. I got to find this place. And get to Vegas to go to UNLV for graduate school. And lo and behold, one of the first things I saw the first week I was in Vegas was a billboard for Cenegenics, and got in touch with them, stayed in contact, finished full-time graduate school, and right around the same time, maybe 3 to 6 months after I got done, position opened up with Cenegenics Las Vegas, and I jumped on board with just went right in the deep end and started working directly with patients and managing their care with our physicians and our team of performance health coaches. And since then moved into the corporate side, because at that time we were at 5 centers across the country, and now we are at 22. So we've expanded, we continue to expand, and the depth of our team is incredible. So I'm fortunate to work so closely with our physicians, Dr. Camper, Dr. Turner being 2 of them, but also of roughly 25 different performance health coaches across the country that myself and my team directly lead and support throughout the day-to-days for our patient care.
Okay. So I think that definitely leads into something. I'm going to kind of call something off the spot really quick, but for those that have joined that do not know Cenegenics, and the way you're articulating it, Rudy, the health component or the health coach component, right? The lifestyle interventions. Obviously, we understand that we have 2 physicians on the call. We know there's clinical interventions. How would you synopsize quickly kind of the picture of Cenegenics, who we are, what we do, how do we work, very quickly, so that the audience understands?
So I like to share that we take a multifaceted approach to optimizing individuals' health based specifically on their unique needs analysis. With the Cenegenics program, there's essentially the introduction of the book, so to speak, that you would first read, and that is your performance health assessment, where we look at various biomarkers in the blood that range from cardiometabolic panels to hormone panels, thyroid, deep insights around lipid profiles like ApoB and Lp(a). And then we pair that with on-site physical testing that runs the gamut from cognitive testing like brain EEG. We do VO2 max testing to see how well the heart, lungs, and muscles work together during exercise. We do DEXA scan analysis for bone mineral density and body composition testing. And we also evaluate your behaviors and your lifestyle and what medications you may currently be taking and what challenges you've had and what your levels of motivation are. And we take all this information and have a evaluation of that at day 1 and understand your baseline and what your goals are and what your starting point is. Because if your starting point is here, it's going to be different from many other people's, but your end goals are very similar, everyone's going to have a little bit of a different path. Like some people can handle climbing over the big mountains early on. Some people need to go up maybe a very mild incline first. Some people just may not be able to get that to the aggressive stuff until later on down the road. So we help identify that during that baseline evaluation, being our performance health assessment. And then that helps us craft and shape the actual program, which then ties in the various treatments and therapies that our physicians will then lead with the patients, various nutraceuticals, how intense or limited intensities our exercise may need to be, what nutritional methodologies we want to implement. From a nutrition perspective, one thing I like to share is that in a good way, we are agnostic when it comes to nutritional, tribal thought, because what works for some people may not work for others. They may not like it. They may not enjoy it. It may be too difficult to sustain. So as long as we can find the correct path for that individual to achieve the outcomes that are tied with most optimal health and improved longevity, that's the direction we're going to go with that patient.
So with all that in mind, and I think this is a question that can go to Dr. Camper, Dr. Turner, whoever wants to jump in. So this is something where obviously it's a comprehensive program with a clinical side, with lifestyle interventions, obviously having the health coaches involved, and a multifaceted approach looking at biometrics and additional data to be able to come up with a customized program. There's a lot of those out there. If you explain it that way, they're there. So What would you say makes Cenegenics different, or even if you want to lean into, because it is specifically Miami, Cenegenics Miami different? Want to take that, Dr. Camper?
Yes, I'll jump in. So I think what makes us different, and obviously I'm one of the newly recruits in the company at this point in time, but we can see here with Rudy and also from what I have learned so far is we have a high retention in patients and also employees in terms of physicians and health coach. We have this team approach where everybody is approaching the patients, but also we have the longest track records of doing that with our patients since the 1990s, I believe. So at this point, we kind of have that track record. And in addition to the retention into our physician, we also have this sense of innovation where we're still trying to move forward as we're hiring patients like physician like myself or Dr. Turner, where we're really trying to be at the top edge of what's going on nowadays in terms of health performance, and now having physicians that are sports medicine specialized. So we really are trying to be at the top of what a multidisciplinary program can provide, and just not from the health perspective, but also health performance perspective, but from a primary care standpoint. That's my background, and I can tell you that there's not one most comprehensive evaluation or assessment you will get. I guess I'll derivate a little bit into the traditional medicine. If you were to come into a primary care setting, there is nothing that comes close to it in terms of assessment from a health perspective, biomarkers, bioderivative, and everything that we're providing.
Yeah. So that said, and we're getting some questions in. So I think the next question is just knowing that both you and Dr. Turner are from a sports medicine background. So with both of you specializing as that, as well as age management, how does the role of sports medicine play out in performance medicine? What does that intersection look like?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think, the nice thing about sports medicine in particular is the kind of patients that you see. Number one, they have an expectation, not just that they're going to recover, but typically that they're going to perform at a very high level. And also because, they derive their sense of meaning and purpose from what it is a lot of times that they're able to do. And sometimes it takes a different, path with somebody who's a great entrepreneur and a great parent and a great athlete, and they're trying to balance these things and make them all together. But just to give an example, like I had a guy, he was in his low 50s, come into the clinic. He had a knee problem. He'd had a little problem with the spine, but mostly knee. And he came in and we have a discussion. And every time I have a discussion with a patient at their initial visit, I always say, what are your goals? Right. And so we get very, very specific about what goals we want to achieve. And then typically that determines, do we need to be really aggressive or can we be a little bit more conservative? And so in his case, even though, he was in his low 50s, he said, I want to win a national tennis championship. Right. And I was like, awesome. Tell me about, what's preventing you from doing that. And so, he was a smart guy. He was very data driven because he owned a wealth management practice, and so he loved looking at data, which was great because then it meant looking at genomics, looking at wearables, looking at biomarkers, looking at things like not just what's my body fat percentage, but where am I muscularly relative to the percentile of my age, and how does that translate into achieving my functional goals on the course? What's my sleep physiology? How do I recover after I've had a difficult weekend of matches? So all of those things I think really push you as a physician to say, look, we can eradicate the vast majority of chronic disease if we can effectively improve somebody's metabolic function, optimize what they eat, how they move, how they sleep, and how they deal with stress. Right. But the problem is at least in the standard type of medical environment or the standard of care, the United States has not kind of been focused on elite prevention of care, or maybe some other European countries and other countries around the world have probably stepped that up a little bit. So the interesting thing I think about sports medicine and Cenegenics is, if you actually went and did a sports fellowship in Europe, you would learn some of the things that Cenegenics does just by virtue of what you're practicing and doing there. I think for us in the United States, it probably makes a lot better sense to be partnered with somebody like Rudy, who's an expert in exercise physiology, and who can also speak to nutrition and other aspects, so that when people have a needs analysis, they can get a plan that's a lot more comprehensive than what they get in a typical 20-30 minute consultation as a new patient with a doctor in a traditional clinic.
So I think that's a really good segue for the next question. So in a few words, I guess the easiest way for people to digest this, if they haven't had experience with Cenegenics yet, or they're just recently, window shopping, so to speak, what can someone expect when they come into the Cenegenics Center? What is that experiential thing like?
You want
to take that, Rudy?
I can. Yeah, it's multiple perspectives. So I think from the physical piece is that they most likely have never been evaluated to that depth within a single day in a single location, and also have an understanding around the benefits of everything that's being tested, and also understanding that everything is connected, either directly or indirectly. Nicole, you like to point out one of my analogies I use a lot of, where if I'm buying a house, right, but I live in another country, but I'm going to make this purchase, I can have someone go out there and look through the windows, but they can't do a walkthrough. So I'm looking through as many windows from the back of the house, the side of the house, the second floor of the house, to see what's going on inside. That's what essentially we're doing when we look at a brain EEG, or when we do a VO2, or when we do strength testing, when we look at bone density, and we look at all the different lab biomarkers. We see what's going on collectively for that individual, versus just looking at something in a petri dish and one singular piece of information. People talk about getting their testosterone measured with an at-home lab kit, and it's just a total testosterone value. It doesn't tell you anything else, like DHT, free testosterone, estradiol, luteinizing hormone, all these other pieces you don't even know. And then you also don't see how it's impacting other elements around your cardiovascular health, your metabolic health, or there's so much information that's out there. So we aim and we achieve data capture for so many different elements when someone comes to a Cenegenics office and does their performance health assessment, but also for follow-up. And the other piece that I find it really beneficial for, especially now, where it's information overload on social media and just any medium of information, is that no one really has a clear vision or can set clear intentions of how they're going to achieve one day after the next to hit their milestones, because there's stuff everywhere. Should I be a carnivore diet, or should I be vegan, or should I do zone 2 cardio only, or should I do high intensity interval training, or is testosterone bad? All these pieces, is it good or bad? We look at so much information. Our physicians, Dr. Camper and Dr. Turner, do such a fantastic job, as well as all of our other physicians, on educating and taking the time with the patients so they fully understand this, so that they have a vision of what they're going to be accomplishing and where they're going to go, so that the next day they go to bed at night, they wake up in the morning, there's intention behind that day. They have an intention of what they're going to be choosing to eat. They have an intention of how they're going to be managing stress at the end of the day. They're going to know where they're going to schedule exercise in. When they go and do their exercise, whether it be at home or the gym, they know what they're going to be doing, because it's not just, they're not going to be, just walking around and hitting a couple sets on a machine and say they went to the gym for 50 minutes, 60 minutes. They know that I'm going to do my cardiovascular exercise at this heart rate, at this intensity. I'm going to recover for this long, and I'm going to maybe push myself a little bit. If I want to have a reach goal, I'm going to push myself up to this heart rate. When I get home, I'm going to consume around 30 to 50 grams of protein, because I know that's going to initiate the recovery. And it's going to build my lean body mass. So when I do a follow-up DEXA scan at Cenegenics Miami, I see that I'm building lean tissue, losing body fat, and also my hormone production is much better. My cortisol management is better. So every action that someone has, people are so distracted all the time that there's really no intentions behind any of their decision-making process or their behaviors. We rein that all in so that the decisions that you do make have intention behind them.
I think you sort of answered the next question from Jim G. So what about day-to-day health? I live in Boston. Do I need a local doc too? I'm very up to speed on biomarkers, VO2 max testing, sleep, etc. Nice.
So we primarily, Cenegenics physicians, I don't mean to speak, Dr. Camper, Dr. Turner, feel free to jump in. So in many cases, the primary care element, you should still have a primary care physician available. If you see a cardiologist, if you have some unique cases going on, we encourage you to continue to work with those physicians, but in a collaborative way. we don't replace your core set of physicians for your primary care or for your specialty medicine. However, everything we do and we accomplish is it's a complementary therapy for everything else that you're going to be doing. And there's an increased communication. Like, for example, like when we have someone come into the office and they do a VO2 max test, and they're seeing a cardiologist typically doesn't put them on a VO2 max. They're going to do a stress test wearing an EKG where they push them up to around 80% of their maximum, and they use a logarithm to identify like how they could have handled that higher intensity outcome, just that gap. We actually take our patients to that gap, that true dynamic cardiac output, to see how well the heart is functioning during those peak levels of exercise. And if something looks off, we have those records available to our patients, and those patients can then share that with their primary care or their specialty medicine physicians. So while we don't encourage people to like leave their primary care because you have a long-standing history of that, but we are an adjunct part of your overall team. We have our Cenegenics Miami team, and we have our Cenegenics, New York teams, and all these teams across the country.
And Boston's coming.
But for Jim, for you in Boston, like you have your Jim G Boston team, and Cenegenics would be a key player in that.
Right. And I think where Jim was leaning in is more about his day-to-day health. And I think that actually is the answer, is Cenegenics, because we are that entity that focuses in on lifestyle modifications and lifestyle interventions, if I said that correctly, right, Rudy?
No,
so
you
that
did. And I think
wouldn't necessarily be there. And I don't, again, encapsulating what we do, if I may, that consistency in that team, that day-to-day element, you are guided day-to-day. So when you do have a performance health coach, that is specifically what they're involved in as it relates to your activity and lifestyle modifications. And then they work hand in hand in tandem with your clinical entity, being your physician, to adjust, modify, and complement whatever those specific protocols are set forth by that medical team. Does that make sense?
No, and to Dr. Turner's point, there's and Dr. Camper, is that we can manage risk factors and really potentially reverse early cardiometabolic diseases very wildly successfully by utilizing the data and the metrics that we use as decision making points. So while many of our goals, our end goals, may be the same, your dynamic path, that day-to-day path, it's going to have some variation. There are going to be some pivots. We have had patients that have a lot of work-related travel, or they have the birth of a new child, or on the upper side end, they have a divorce, or they have other challenges, and all these things influence how your day-to-day will run. So we can't expect our patients that an initial recommendation for day 1 is going to be the same recommendation for day 87, and then day 263. There's so many different nuances, so many different stressors and challenges and obstacles that occur, that having that day-to-day contact with your performance health coach and with your physicians to say, hey, I have a crazy month. I'm traveling 6 times this month to go do speaking engagements, or go get quotes on X, Y, and Z. I may need to dial it down. We will make adjustments for that so that your program can be sustainable, and that you can also continue to measure success appropriately. Like if we say success is hitting X amount of workouts per week, but you live at home and you don't do anything all day long other than work out, that's a different measure for success than someone who is, managing a massive household and a massive business and traveling. And although there's, those are challenges there, if you feel like you're always losing, no one wants to feel that way. I mean, especially no one wants to pay to feel that way, honestly. Right. So we make those adjustments and optimize that path for that individual so that they can still achieve those goals, but we're just maybe taking a little bit of a different direction.
Yeah. So we have 2 questions. One I think I can easily answer. This is again from Jim G. ETA in Boston. It's needed here, not much here in terms of longevity like there is in LA and New York City. Our goal for that is we're hoping to get it legs underneath it within the month of January, Rudy, probably. However, I have to say this, Jim, as much as I'd say, yes, Boston's a great place to be, but the way we function is it's a one time a year that you're actually physically in a center, and then you're followed throughout consistently virtually. But if you want to be in there more, you absolutely can. And you'll always have access to any Cenegenics center, no matter which one you actually belong to. But Miami being our flagship, and also having Dr. Camper here, which the follow-up question will go to you, Dr. Camper. We are, after this session, we are offering kind of like a travel voucher. If you did want to head out to Miami and check it out, it's not only a beautiful center, but you obviously are getting an opportunity to rub elbows with both physicians today. So that leads me to the next question. So Dr. Camper, I'd like to actually direct this towards you because you leaned into this a little bit, because you talked about also being in primary care at some point as well. So one of the questions is, what does an executive physical or assessment, right? I guess referring to our PHA, or performance health assessment is what we call it. What does it include, and how is it different than what somebody would actually get from their primary care doctor?
So just like Rudy mentioned, it's a lot more in depth and a lot more comprehensive. Like your cardiologist would not try to run a VO2 on you, and your primary care would not look into all the markers, the biomarkers that we're looking into, that being including the hormonal levels as well as inflammatory levels, and as well as ApoB. A lot of primary care nowadays would just, self-sustain to the total cholesterol or your LDL levels. But we go a lot more in depth. And to add on to this, the difference in our approach here at Cenegenics, I like to give this analogy of your gas tank. So when you drive and your gas tank is like halfway in the middle, you keep driving with no other concern until the light goes on, it's empty, and you need to go and stop at the pump, get some gas. So the way your primary care approach usually will be is, well, the light is not on, we're good to go. This is not how we work in Cenegenics. We're thinking longevity. We want that tank to be full. So we really trying to replete all of our different markers that need to be addressed, while still not try to overflow the tank, okay? And like I said, too much of anything is not good. Too much water is not good. So we just want to stay in the tank, but we want that tank pretty full instead of allowing it to get closer to empty. So a lot more in depth. We do test physical abilities, and also we have a little bit of CNS assessment with the WAVI, and really looking into certain cognitive reflex, cognitive function. At this point, the data is still pretty preliminary, but we still have pretty decent baselines that we're able to trend. And again, everything is tailored to our patients. So even if you did not do too great, or if you did average on your first CNS evaluation, all we care about is that on the follow-up, we're progressing and we're actually going into the right direction. And if not, then that's when we can actually trigger further management.
It's a great answer. So is there anything you'd like to add to that, Dr. Turner?
Yeah, Jim, I really appreciate your question. And I, working in Florida for a long time made me used to working as sort of a destination healthcare kind of company. And so we many times have patients that travel from, Canada, New York, Boston, et cetera. I mean, that and Miami in particular, also from Central America and some other countries. So it's pretty normal, honestly, that we collaborate with another physician. At least in my practice, it's been pretty normal. I don't know if your question is like, if I get an upper respiratory infection, do you call in antibiotics or something? I mean, at least for me, like everyone that I see through Cenegenics, they get my cell phone and my email, and I just, I make it a priority to communicate pretty well with them, and we navigate what are the things that, we can solve from afar, and hey, what are the things that maybe need more follow-up. But just to share too, for my personal story, I mean, I'm, a youngish physician. I'm knocking on the door of 40. I've done CrossFit for the last few years. I think if you looked at my ApoB, a lot of people, which is a cholesterol marker, if you haven't heard of it, some people would say, look, you should be on this statin or this drug that lowers lipid cholesterol. And some people want to be on that medicine and other people don't, depending on preferences and maybe interactions and family experience. So one of the things, like when I went through the physical with Cenegenics, is they promptly said, you know what, we want you to have this AI algorithm influenced CT scan of your heart, which is called Clearly. And the interesting thing about Clearly, if you look at it, it's really the first time we've ever been able in medicine, really in cardiology, and you can ask cardiologists this question, to be able to not just say, do you have calcium or do you have, arteries that are narrowed or clogged, but is the actual thing inside that artery dangerous or not? In my case, it was actually very good news, but it made me a lot more confident, about my plan. And not only that, but what my plan was going to be for the next 40 years, as opposed to the next 10. If you look at like most of our risk metrics in cardiology, for example, they're based on 10-year risk. But most of my patients, they don't just want to be healthy for 10 years and then expect to go downhill. they want to do great for 20, 30, 40 years, et cetera. So that's kind of the, an
I
example.
agree.
I think that highlights the uniqueness. So.
Yeah, and I think that goes into another question that we have here. So, because you mentioned Clearly, and so Clearly is obviously one of our partnerships, one of the interventions that we do, or diagnostics that we do leverage. I have a personal story with that one as well. Someone very close to me had what they called the Widowmaker on their CCTA. It was devastating when this person can run a 5K in 24 minutes at the age of 58. And had the Widowmaker, which is your RCA and your LAD at over 60% blocked. And because of our partnership with Clearly, we were able to receive the results within 3 hours. So we had the CCTA uploaded 3 hours, had the results back. And thank you, whatever you believe in, thank God to me, but it was reassuring to know that there were interventions that can take place to actually reverse the plaque because of the type of the plaque that it was. So great news when you're looking at, because it kind of looks like you're looking at through the barrel of a gun. But having that technology and knowing that there's interventions out there that can help, now, there's hope that something won't happen quickly. It may happen later, but not as fast as it probably could have. So yeah, that's just one of our partnerships. Another one would be Prenuvo. So with that in mind, I do want to lean into this next question that someone asked. It was specific to our technologies. So what does the role of new technologies in patient care as it applies to Cenegenics?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great segue because, one of the benefits too with working with Cenegenics and our physicians is that there's not the red tape that you would typically deal with in the traditional model when you do want to evaluate an AI analyzed, CCTA, or if you do want to get, complete genomic assessment of all 22,000 genes, or you do want to do a whole body MRI. We can now, while we don't have a whole body MRI machine in Cenegenics Miami or any of our other centers, we are able to help, dispatch and distribute and direct our patients towards our partnerships to someone who can get these done. And all of that data can then be fed back into their Cenegenics, medical records for that Cenegenics physician to care for. So in an outside world, when you try to get this stuff done, you need to have, so many different processes in place that you need to go through step after step after step to see if you qualify to get any of that advanced testing done. It may take 6 months to a year or even longer to finally get to where you want to be. And by that time, you lost, valuable interest and momentum and insights that you've been wanting to collect. And it's a depressing way to try to get information on yourself. When working with our Cenegenics physicians, they're able to evaluate, yes, this is a great thing for you to look into. This is something we want you to incorporate because it's a main interest or you have a family history of it. Maybe insurance won't cover it for until 10 years, but let's do it now. Dr. Turner's point, let's do this now to evaluate this risk and get an early actions in place. And we're able to not only curate that, but we're able to utilize our network and distribute it and dispatch it appropriately.
Okay, thank you for answering that so comprehensively. I know Jim needs to leave. Jim, you're going to receive an email. You can actually, I would prefer, I'm going to see if I can grab your information and I'll send you an email directly so that we can set you up with next steps. And we'll go from there. So other than that, I have another question here. And I think this is probably what a lot of people are curious about. I think it's just because the day and age that we're in, it's immediate gratification, or how do you get that immediate gratification? So what are some of the most immediate benefits that someone experiences when they participate in a Cenegenics program? Does Dr. Trevor or Dr. Turner, Dr. Camper, or do any of you want to tackle that?
I can start up with, and Dr. Turner, if you want to add on, sure, go ahead. I would say the immediate effect is that sense of support, of community right away with Cenegenics when they walk through the door, and we're going through a full day of health assessment, and as we're teaching them about all the different biomarkers, they don't feel like they just spent 15 minutes with the doctor at the primary care office and they're leaving with, a bunch of prescription maybe, or just questionable questions on their labs. Here, I think we're trying to really zero in on every particular biomarkers or biometrics that are being assessed throughout the day. And then, we're making sure that they still have full access to the health coach or the physician as they're joining the program here with Cenegenics. I think that's all I'm seeing in terms of immediate effect. And then it's always great to see also their follow-ups and their progress that are everything is stepwise, of course, but we're seeing some pretty solid progress within the first follow-up, 6 weeks to 3 months.
Is there any way to describe what do you mean by progress? What's some of the things that people often
So again, so we're following, yeah, so we're following labs and also biometrics. So mostly after 6 weeks, it will be more in terms of blood work, but also obviously we want to have the overall assessment of the patient. So a simple question as, how are you feeling? Do you feel like you're having more energy within 1 month or so after doing lifestyle changes, being with exercise, plus or minus hormonal adjustments? They do feel a difference right away. The difference from, I would say, other programs or their primary care, where the regular recommendation is, well, we want you to exercise more. And I think right now the current sports medicine recommendation is about 120 or 150 minutes a week of moderate activity. Patients don't understand what moderate activity is. You know, I hear a lot patients saying, well, doc, I walk every day for an hour. I walk my dog. And my next question is always, do you sweat? And less likely. So, the first, I would say, without any metrics, is, do you sweat? But here the difference is, obviously we're following heart rates. We have very precise and accurate numbers and targets that we want to reach. And our health coach are amazing at really following up with our patients and to make sure that those exercises, it being 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or even an hour, are actually leading towards progress and benefits, not just that 1 hour walk that really doesn't provide much benefits besides just letting the dog having a good time outside.
Dr. Turner,
I would say, yeah, just some other things I've noticed. Patients now are really savvy. They're really well educated. They ask me difficult questions. They're listening to Peter Attia and Huberman Lab and reading Brian Johnson's book, and they're doing all these things that they are out there advocating for themselves and seeking this knowledge. I think what we sometimes find is that people will get, I went one place to get my DNA done, and I went to Insight Tracker to get my labs done, and then I went to somewhere else so I could get a whole body MRI. And the problem sometimes becomes is you get all this information and it's maybe not categorized in a way that's digestible, that gives you a good plan, right? And so what I think sometimes people will say after Cenegenics is, the first thing they'll say is, no one has ever looked at me and told me as much information in a medical appointment, usually over all of their interactions with the healthcare system in general, as they did today.
Yeah.
Right. And that is like really gratifying as a physician and a health coach and a team member and a program coordinator and everybody else, because it's like a magical moment that leads to transformation. I think in the early days, when you look at what happens, right? I mean, yeah, I think like what Lloyd Camper said, my energy is better, my sleep is better, my performance is getting better at work, my sexual intimacy is better, I feel stronger, I feel younger, whatever. I mean, those are emotions, right? Which matter. I mean, that's part of what it means to be human. But I think those are the things that I see in the early days, and then, 90 days later, when we redo biometrics, we see that people's markers are getting better and they're at lower risk for long-term disease effects. But I just wanted to make sure I answered your question, Nicole.
No, that was actually right on the money. I was in Houston yesterday, and a couple came through for their performance health assessment together, and they spent an exorbitant amount of time with the physician after a lot of questions. And when they came out, I just said, so how did it go? And they same answer, I almost word for word of what you said. And I've never received so much information before. And then I'm gonna just say it. It was the wife who turned around and said, yeah, it was so much, but I'm so relieved that I know what to do now. And I have support to do it. And I think that's a huge difference when it comes to Cenegenics. And again, not to slam any other executive physicals out there. It's important to have that in-depth knowledge, but we go full circle. And that was the really cool thing that's what the wife tied together was, and I know I'm going to be supported in getting this fixed now. It's like I finally got looked under the hood and now it's going to be fixed. So that said, I think we can move into, we have time for one more question, if that's cool with everyone on the line. I think the easiest one I can go, we have a couple here. So this one actually is, this is really important because it's very specific to Cenegenics Miami. It's what does the future of Cenegenics look like? Like, I guess, where are we going? And the reason why I'm excited that this is on this call for both Dr. Camper and Dr. Turner, and then obviously Rudy, definitely chime in. But interestingly enough, Miami is going to be, and Boston as well, it will be one of them as well, where we are going to be looking into some advanced services. I'll leave it at that. I think you guys know what I'm leaning into.
Yeah.
So Dr. Turner,
Yes.
Dr. Camper, do you want to illuminate on some of those interventions that are?
Yes, I can start up and then I'll let Dr. Turner kind of finish it up. He has a lot more experience than me there. But yes, so our thoughts is really to move forward and really optimize the fact that Dr. Turner and myself are sports medicine trained with procedural backgrounds. And I think that in that sense, Dr. Turner and myself are actually complementing ourselves very well in the sense that as we're looking into regenerative medicine, like you mentioned, the stem cells, PRP kind of procedures, injections that we would be able to provide for our patients from a musculoskeletal standpoint. We want our patients to be physically active, but there's the wear and tear that's present. There's the arthritis that's present. There's the tendonitis that's, bothering and slowing down and causing our patients to have to take a break and slow down. So what we're trying to accomplish is really trying to not just being on the preventive side at that point, but also on the treatment side. So, and where I was going with Dr. Turner and myself being complementing each other is that from a physical medicine standpoint, their non-op ortho sides is more central, so around the spine and the hips, versus myself from a primary care sports medicine standpoint, we're more on the extremities. So we can virtually intervene on someone from head to toes in regards to their complaints. So that's where I think something amazing that we could be providing here in Cenegenics in terms of regenerative medicine and providing injections for patients and actual musculoskeletal complaints.
Yeah, I'm going to just I want to close the gap there a little bit for anyone that's listening. It's so obviously part of our program and many other programs, we attack the individual needs through various interventions. What, again, lifestyle management. So it could be through diet and exercise. Obviously, we go a little bit more in depth just because of the level of the health coaches that we have on board, all of them being specialized in some level of education that's beyond personal training. They're all master's degrees and above. But in addition to that, it's the clinical side that oftentimes is managed through various peptides, compounding RXs, such as, HRT, so on and so forth. I think what's really interesting is because in order for this all to work, and Rudy always says this too, that lifestyle component is so important. And I think where some people, and especially the mean age being 57 and above, oftentimes find that they don't necessarily have success is because that one element that's not always completely addressed, which is it hurts me to do those things though. And so to have the opportunity to really be able to understand that there is a degenerative situation for someone's body, and even though they need those lifestyle modifications, we have a unique opportunity to address that full circle and complete totality. So with that said, Dr. Turner, you want to lean in a little bit?
Yeah, I would just thank you for that. That was a good summary, but
I get them from time to time.
Sorry.
I do that from time to time.
Yeah, the last 10 years in particular, it's just been a really fun time to be part of, whether you call it minimally invasive or non-operative orthopedics. I think the range of what we can do to restore function, optimize somebody's movement without having to cut them open, even without having to use arthroscopy or a camera, is pretty incredible. Some of that is advanced technology like ultrasound and X-ray, and some of it is us getting more sophisticated understanding of what concentrations of different cells should be used to treat different tissues. I guess the other thing I would say too is, wearables are really crucial. And I spend time with patients looking at, Oura rings and whoops and looking at CGMs or continuous glucose monitors to assess what they're eating and how they refuel and how that changes their physiology during the day, right? And I think in a lot of ways that has provided sort of a range of continuous data that's happening in a patient's lifestyle in their own environment all the time. And we just don't get that data or feedback when you come into a clinic, right? So there's a value there that I think is only going to expand as time goes on. And we've seen it be very successful to achieve their goals.
Anything else to add? Because I think that was a perfect answer. Rudy, you want to lean in before we?
Yeah, no, I think to the full circle comment you made is that, with Miami being one of our flagships, they're actually an early adopter to our 3D movement analysis as well. So we have a single camera 3D movement analysis that all individuals that complete that receive a 6-week movement plan that has a 100% success rate as far as improvement goes for looking at mobility and stability of the ankles, knees, hips, shoulder, cervical spine, and more. So not only do we evaluate baseline, but now we have all these potential services to help, work from the orthopedic perspective, whether it be various forms of shockwave therapy or whether it be, PRP or exosome or other options. But then we can also retest and actually demonstrate that improvement. And when the time may come to phase off of those treatments and those injections or IV, however they're being administered, we also have a massive formulary of nutraceuticals that can also support for long-term impact. We have a collagen support product with patented raw materials that actually shows cartilage regrowth in the knee at 47 weeks. So if we identify someone with limited movement patterns and we can treat them appropriately with these available tools and layer in that fundamental nutraceutical for them over time, they're going to be a different person come the end of the year. Like quite literally, they're going to have new cartilage in the knee. They're going to have better mobility. They're going to have better hormone function. They're going to have better energy levels. And they're going to be able to perform and set the tone for those decades later in their life.
Yeah, and Rudy, just to comment on that, it's just not as cool as cartilage regrowth, but like I could not get my vitamin D to go up, and I was taking vitamin D I bought from the store, then I bought it on our website and all this stuff. Once I got the vitamin D from Cenegenics, that was actually highly purified and dosed correctly, then I finally started seeing a response.
I'm the same way with DHEA. My DHEA that I get over the counter never worked until I bought something, with our program. And to that same point too, Nicole, like you asked about like what kind of immediate responses people can have. And there's so much variation too, because now instead of just thinking like, so Jim G, I saw in his comment that, they're doing really great on their own. They're like, man, he has a great VO2. He listed in the comments.
Yeah, I saw that.
But
yeah,
but 50, like, 60. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's huge. So, but one of the things is that, instead of just doing it alone, like if you want to go fast, go by yourself, but if you want to go far, go together. So I have a friend who is, he's mostly carnivore diet just because he likes meat, manages his weight well. He's fearful of cardiovascular pieces, so he doesn't salt any of his like animal proteins that he's eating, but he goes and plays basketball for like 3 hours at a time, doesn't have any salt, doesn't eat really any vegetables. And I was like, okay, like you're cramping up like crazy. Like I'm sitting in the car waiting for my kid to get out of school and I'm just cramping. What should I do? And I was like, hey, how about you maybe just salt some of the food you're eating, or even put like some pink Himalayan salt just to sprinkle in your water that you're drinking when you're training. Get on some magnesium glycinate or magnesium threonate that has a high elemental magnesium, and try to work in some greens like into those meals so you get some potassium there. Literally within a single session of even just pink Himalayan salt and one night prior having magnesium glycinate, no cramps after 3 hours of basketball that he played yesterday.
Wow.
So there's so many different pockets of opportunity that when you work together with a team, you have so many different minds that can call out just like little things that you may be overlooking that you were completely unaware of that have been like causing you some kind of like hurdle or obstacle for like years. And it could be, in some cases like this, it can be a massively quick fix.
I love those stories because it's like duh moments, but wow, where have I been all my life? Like how am I just finding this out? Okay, so let's see. I think at this point we're going to close it up if there's no other questions. So that is all we have for today. Thanks everyone who joined. And again, please reach out. We are excited to work with each and every one of you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Look forward to seeing everyone
much.
next week too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.